Welcome to Striking Options, the show that reveals the options you have to better navigate markets. I'm Jeff Kilburg, and we've adjusted our show until we get back into the studio. I'm joined today by Bob Icino. Welcome, Bob.
Good to talk to you, Jeff.
Well, exciting week, Bob. 40% of the S&P 500 companies, nearly 300 of those companies, are going to report their earnings this week. We're seeing another $1 trillion in stimulus potentially be approved out of Washington, D.C. But my question to you is, which was more important to market sentiment?
Well, definitely to sentiment, I think it's short-term earnings, medium-term, a new stimulus plan. The earnings, a lot's been made about earnings, where we've got 80% of the companies that have reported actual earnings so far having beaten a much lowered EPS. That definitely is a tailwind. But I think there's kind of a replay of the government taking things down to the wire and then potentially getting a deal done just in time.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's dive into two topics today if you're comfortable with that. I want to talk about the NASDAQ 100 making new all-time highs. And then I also want to shift gears and talk about the recent surge in Bitcoin. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, here we go. So technology, we talked about last Thursday being one of the biggest earnings days. We saw Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google. They all delivered on their earnings reports. They actually those four stocks added $215 billion in market cap after the close on Thursday. That's like adding a Home Depot. So sure enough, we are seeing technology continue to attract assets. My question to you is, we see such disparity between the technology sector and the broader S&P 500. Can this persist?
Yeah, I think it can. I think the one issue that might plague technology is what you mentioned a second ago, which is the stimulus plan. And I mean the money directly to consumers. One of the things that tech could count on during the lockdowns was that people had extra money to spend and they spent it online, which certainly went into things like new iPads and purchases from Amazon and the like. So I think that might be the one thing that could throw a wrench in the work, but it seems like the Fed put is alive and well for technology.
And when we see wrenches potentially being thrown, we like talking about utilizing NASDAQ 100 futures or the micro E-mini NASDAQ futures. And also exciting at the end of the month for trade date of August 31st, there's actually going to be options on the NASDAQ, the micro options. Those are coming out as well as micro options on the S&P 500. So a lot of tools in the toolbox, Bob.
Now, this is my favorite new announcement from the CME group, short of the micros themselves. I really loved when those came out. But those micro options, I think, are just going to be very, very valuable. I like to use the NASDAQ specifically for hedging and for some short-term opinions in the market.
Fantastic. Well, let's shift gears. Let's talk about Bitcoin. Here we are in Bitcoin, back above 11,000. Really interesting to see. It's almost like a safe haven trade. After the month of March and the volatility, we saw a great appreciation and attraction of assets into Bitcoin.
I'm going to steal a term from OJ Renick, where he called Bitcoin a high beta safety play. And I really like that. And I think what we're going to see from Bitcoin now is we're going to see it tracking gold much more closely. Prior to that, it tracked the stock market. I think it may have disconnected from that a little bit.
We're also seeing an increase in volume in the Bitcoin futures. Does that really just speak to the adoption worldwide, as we're seeing more and more institutions and active investors adopt some form of allocation or the suitability of Bitcoin in a portfolio?
I think the Bitcoin futures was a validating factor in that space. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing reports of, is that less and less of the holding of cryptocurrencies is being done on the exchanges and much more hedging is being done at the CME.
All right, Bob. Well, thanks as always. And we also want to thank you for tuning in to Striking Options. And please tune in every week as we will continue to strike options.